Studies show 100% of assassinations go horribly wrong, either for the victim or the hitman, or whoever paid for the whole thing just decided to be an idiot. And history has a long list of successful assassinations, but it has an even longer list of failed ones. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 10 assassination attempts that went horribly wrong, and none of them actually worked out. Well, okay, one actually did go through. But before we get started, make sure you head on down, make sure your subscribe button is activated, the bell should be ringing, and go help that like button escape its very own assassination. Also, make sure you stick around for number 1 because Susan is the real hero today. And we are off with number 10, innocent until proven innocent? In Canada in 2008, instead of filing for divorce, she hired a hitman. She did it all for the money, too. She knew she would get nothing through a divorce, but she would inherit 3 properties and receive $500,000 pension if he was dead. Nicole had problems finding the right man for the job. The first man fled with a $250,000 payment, and 2 more turned her down. She finally found a 4th man who was willing to get the job done. The catch was he wasn't really down for the job because he was an undercover officer. The officer played along during the first meeting, asking questions about the job and how she wanted it done, but when Nicole showed up for the second meeting, she was arrested. After her arrest, Nicole changed her story, saying her husband was abusive, and the court actually sided with her. If the officer or the husband were allowed to testify, I wonder if she would have gotten off so lucky. Don't worry, these next people aren't so lucky. Moving on to number 9. I kid you not, this next guy's name is Muhammad, and he had had enough with the Houston Police Department. There was an officer who was a bit too fond of giving him tickets for having excessive vehicles parked at his logistics and shipping business. Muhammad thought he could save himself money if he spent $2,000 to off the officer instead of paying tens of thousands of dollars to move the vehicles. In 2018, he hired a hitman who ended up being an undercover officer. Muhammad initially suggested throwing acid on the officer, but after realizing he might survive that and issue him more tickets, he thought it should be something with a lower chance of surviving. The undercover officer returned with stage pictures of his dead colleague. Muhammad was probably impressed, but he was also immediately arrested by SWAT team. He had given the undercover officer $500 earlier and was meeting up with him to pay the remainder, $1,500, after confirming the death. The money he was gonna pay with? Yeah, they found it in his pocket. Time for number 8. Sorry, wrong number. Have you ever sent a text message to someone and it ended up being the wrong person? It's either really embarrassing or you laugh it off, or in this case, it's incriminating. In 2017, Jeff was arrested after sending several suspicious text messages to his former boss. The messages, which included the line, "You remember you said that you would help me kill my wife," was intended for a hitman only identified as Shane. The messages also contained details about how they would split the money he would receive on his wife's insurance. Jeff also gave Shane information about where his wife worked and what time she was to get off. He asked that it look like an accident or a fake robbery. All these messages sent to the wrong person, his former boss. And his former boss wasn't just going to sit on this new information. He took it straight to the police, who arrested Jeff. Jeff said he wasn't really going to go through with it. He was just angry and venting. If that's how you vent, you need help. We are at number 7 now with best friends forever. What are friends for besides having your back 24/7? Maria must have been unfamiliar with this because in 2017 she was already planning on divorcing her husband, Raymond. And then she realized she needed something a little faster. By faster, I mean she decided to have him whacked. She hired a hitman who, unknown to her, was a friend of her husband. The hitman informed her husband, who then informed deputies. Raymond's friend then referred Maria to an undercover officer posing as another hitman. Maria promised to pay $2,000 and give the man Raymond's truck because he wouldn't be needing it anymore. 2 days later, the police and Raymond faked some pictures of his death, and they brought the pictures to Maria. She was so impressed that she gave him an extra $1,000. If that doesn't scream guilty, I honestly don't know what does. Number 6 is next, and we have novel research. I did a story a while back about a guy who wrote a book about a crime he committed. This guy never actually got to write his book. According to him, he was in the research phase. In 2017, David Harris, 68, was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment for hiring an undercover officer to off his wife, Hazel, so that he could inherit her properties. People are so dang greedy. Harris paid £200,000 for the hit and hoped to earn £800,000 from the sales of all the properties. Then he planned to spend the rest of his days with a 28-year-old woman he had met at a brothel. Harris hired Duke Dean, who introduced him to the undercover officer, aka Chris. Chris recorded the meeting, and the police arrested Harris the next day. Harris completely denied planning to off his wife. He said that he was doing research for his novel about a murder that was intended for a wife. Apparently, during his trial, they believed that his intentions were more malicious than for novel research. Now for number 5 with transaction completed. If you're doing it for the money, make sure you're the beneficiary. Williams was on his second marriage, and he had only been married to Aloma for 4 months, but they were already buried in debt, and Aloma was hoping that maybe she could use some of Williams' $100,000 life insurance policy to escape that debt. In November 2013, she hired her daughter's boyfriend, Chad, to off her husband. Chad contracted the assassination to his cousin Chris, who initially failed. Great job! Chris then hired another man, Ryan, to get the job done. Ryan succeeded, and after that, things quickly started going wrong. First off, Aloma never received the money, because Williams still had his ex-wife listed as his next of kin, so the ex got all the money. Chad was sentenced to 28 years to life for his role in the whole thing. Ryan, 23 years, Chris, 18, and Aloma, well, her daughter, who was only 17 at the time, was placed in a juvenile detention center because she took all the blame for her mother. In the end, Aloma got off scot-free, but she was still in debt. We have made it to number 4, point blank miss. How good's your aim? If I stand you right next to something, will you be able to hit it? This one comes from Bulgaria. In 2013, a man jumped out of an audience and pointed a pistol at Ahmed Dogin, who was giving a speech. He was the leader of a political party in Bulgaria. The shooter, later identified as 25-year-old Oktay, tried to shoot the party leader twice, but the gun wouldn't fire. He was immediately subdued and arrested, and they found he had 2 knives on him as well. This whole thing was seen live on TV. The footage clearly shows Oktay holding the pistol a few inches away from the party leader. Turns out it was a gas pistol. Gas pistols are classified as non-lethal weapons, even though they can cause serious injuries. Police said the shooting was not an assassination attempt, but a stupid ploy at becoming famous. Personally, I would rather live under a rock and never speak to anyone ever again than be famous for failing or succeeding to off someone. In our number 3 spot is Survivor. Nancy is one of the heroes of this video, and I wish more assassinations ended up like this one. On August 18th, 2021, Nancy drove into her garage in Texas to find an assassin waiting for her. Nancy did not realize she was dealing with a hitman. She thought he was a robber who had just broken into her home. The hitman grabbed her from behind, putting his arm around her neck and pointing his gun at her. Nancy was able to free herself from his grip and face him. He asked for her purse, and then he shot her. The bullet actually passed through Nancy's head. Her left eye, completely gone. The man fled with the purse, and guess what? Nancy survived. Police soon realized Nancy's husband, Frank, was behind the entire thing. Frank had been planning it for years. Frank wanted to marry another woman without getting a divorce. And now he's living out his happily ever after with his cellmate. If he has one. We have made it to number 2. Back from the dead. Some people have unbreakable morals, like these men. In 2015, Australia-based Noella was visiting Burundi for her stepmother's funeral when she was kidnapped at gunpoint and forced into a vehicle. She was blindfolded and driven to a safe house. Inside the house, her kidnappers asked her why her husband wanted her dead. Noella told the men that was impossible because her husband would never want to kill her. The men proved her wrong when they called her husband Belenga and told him they had his wife. Noella was so shocked that she fainted. The hitman did not kill Noella because they had a policy against hurting women and children. However, they told her husband she was dead. They freed Noella a few days later, but not before giving her a memory card containing phone conversations and payment receipts they had received from her husband. Noella secretly returned to Australia. Her husband had been telling whoever cared to listen that she was gone. He had been receiving mourners at his home and was seeing some off when Noella showed up. He said his reasoning behind the whole thing was because he thought Noella was going to divorce, and now she is, because he's sitting in jail. Last but not least, we have number 1. This one I like to call reverse card. Nancy was not the only hero in this video. Meet Susan. Susan was an ER nurse. In 2006, she divorced her husband of 17 years. Her now ex-husband Mike was not at all happy about this, so he hired a hitman to off her. Mike had lost his job after the divorce and wanted their home for himself. He paid a man named Edward $50,000 for the hit. One fateful day, Susan returned home to find things unusually dark. She was still trying to figure out what was amiss when Edward struck her with a hammer. Instead of screaming and attempting to escape, as most people would, Susan fought back, and she overpowered Edward. She ended up killing him. Her husband was sentenced to 10 years. Unlucky for him, 6 months before he was due out of jail, he died. Natural causes? I don't know, but he kind of got off lucky. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, slap that like button, activate your subscribe button. Don't forget to check out Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, trooptt.com, and my husband's Kickstarter, because that would be a very kind thing to do. Thank you guys so much, and as always, stay safe out there. Troop TT.